And you said this is Spring Valley Hospital?
Yep, emergency room. We received a patient from the Palms. They got called in as an overdose, but on further inspection, it looks like, well, she was found naked in the room as an unknown caller, and it looks like she was assaulted.
A suspicious death in a Las Vegas hotel room causes a flurry of confusion after it's determined it might not have been an accident as initially thought. Now, a man is behind bars charged with murder for allegedly confessing to killing a purported sex worker. And the craziest part is how detectives determined this suspect was involved. We break it down with Las Vegas criminal defense attorney Michael Trano. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. I want you to listen to this sequence of events. So last month, on June 12th at around 5 p.m., a man called 911, reporting a woman in his hotel room at the Las Vegas Palms Casino Resort had overdosed. The man identified himself simply as Kendall, told the dispatcher he was no longer with her in the room. Okay, it's odd, but wouldn't be the first time I'm sure the police receive a call like this. But then what happens? So hotel security, they respond to the room, and they find single mom of 2 young children, 30-year-old Larissa Garcia, seriously injured with a cut, a laceration on her left jawline, and she was only wearing underwear. Now, according to an arrest report, police were not immediately dispatched because it was thought to be a possible overdose. But Garcia was taken to the hospital, where even more questions arose because hospital staff ultimately called Las Vegas police, saying that Garcia's injuries were not consistent with what was originally thought.
911 emergency, Hill 20472. Do you need police, fire, or medical?
Police.
And you said this is Spring Valley Hospital?
Yep, emergency room. We received a patient from the Palms, room 11117. It looks like it got called in as an overdose, but on further inspection, it looks like, well, she was found naked in the room as an unknown caller, and it looks like she was assaulted. She had, like, bruises and a laceration.
Was she sexually assaulted?
Unknown at this time, but they're actually intubating her right now. She's pretty critical. We're not quite sure what's wrong with her, but she's not breathing.
You said she came from the Palms Casino, correct?
Yeah, it was an unknown caller. They don't know who called, but there was someone, like, it looked like a man's items in the room, but no one was there. We thought it was like an overdose, but she's not responding to Narcan.
And at this point, Garcia was in critical condition. And to further confirm the suspicion of what's happening, a toxicology report came back negative for drugs or alcohol in Garcia's system, which ruled out the accusation that she had overdosed. Now, immediately, police set their sights on the 911 caller, Kendall, but they didn't really know who he was or where he was. That is until they arrived back at the Palms Hotel to learn that the room where Garcia was found was registered to a man named Jason Kendall, who they later determined to be a 35-year-old U.S. Army veteran. Now, after tracking Kendall down, detectives reportedly meet with him at a nearby hotel. He refuses to give a statement, immediately asks for a lawyer. Back to Garcia for a second. She ended up suffering a severe brain injury, likely caused by strangulation or suffocation, and she was declared brain dead on June 21st. And about a week after Garcia's death on June 28th, that is when the whole story changes. Why? Because Jason Kendall apparently turned himself into police and reportedly confessed to strangling Garcia to death and sexually assaulting her. The police report states that Kendall admitted to paying Garcia for sex, around $2,000, but when Garcia allegedly asked for more money, he says he snapped, hit her in the face, choked her for 10 minutes before having sex with her. And do you know what really confirmed he was likely the police's main suspect and that he wasn't making this up? He apparently was captured on surveillance video with Garcia in the resort lobby just hours before the 911 call. After about an hour, Kendall reappears on tape, leaving the hotel alone. And according to reports on that video, no one else entered or exited the room until hotel security arrived. So Kendall was charged with open murder, sexual assault, and battery by strangulation to commit sexual assault. He's being held without bail. His next court date is set for early next month. And a GoFundMe has been set up by a friend of Garcia. It's raised more than the set goal amount of $15,000 to help cover the unexpected funeral costs and celebration of life. Again, a mother to 2 children. We want to talk about this right now with Las Vegas criminal defense attorney Michael Trano. Michael, thanks so much for coming on. Is this case getting a lot of attention where you are right now?
Yeah, it's been all over the media, thus me being here. And as you went through in great detail, the very strange set of circumstances, I mean, he essentially has put himself on a platter for police and is walking himself straight to a conviction with his confession.
Yeah, any way to defend this based upon the facts that I laid out?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the first job of a criminal defense attorney, is to try to brainstorm. So what do we know as a fact? We know as a fact that the hotel room was rented in his name. So that's what we would call a bad fact in the business. As you said, it's the cameras have only him going in. Security in Las Vegas casinos are world renowned. There's cameras everywhere. Typically, they have documentation regarding each and every time somebody uses a room key to enter and exit the room. So that's got him fairly locked in. I'm sure that they have video surveillance, so they're going to soon be gathering of him driving to the hotel. Some of the articles and information that I've read states that they have information regarding him searching regarding sex work, and those two, him and the victim, exchanging information. So it seems, at least at this point, there's no doubt he was in the room. So that's going to be a tough hill to climb if they're going to say that it wasn't him. So I'm not sure if this necessarily was a whodunit. It's more likely going to turn into, potentially, depending on the evidence and the medical examiners, if there is any sort of argument for self-defense, that, as he stated initially, he provided $2,000, and then she said basically, nope, I'm taking this money, time to up the price, what we would call in the business a trick roll. So maybe that's one of the first avenues that his defense attorney is going to have to look into, to see if there's any sort of cooperating evidence based upon his statement that he could defend her, or try to get the confession out, see if he wasn't Mirandized, or if he was under the influence of narcotics himself, or if there's some sort of mental health issue that would rise to the ability of maybe putting in an insanity defense. But insanity defense is very, very, very difficult to put on.
And also, I'll give you another bad fact. Apparently, Garcia had sent a text to someone saying she was meeting a man named Jay at the hotel. So, Jason Kendall. You walked through a lot of different areas where this could be explored. First of all, I think the difficulty, right, was saying the confession, was coerced, or he wasn't Mirandized properly. Isn't it complicated by the fact that he seemingly voluntarily went to police? It'd be different if he was picked up, he's put in a room, there's no, maybe they don't provide him food, they don't provide him the Miranda rights, they keep him all night. But the idea that he voluntarily shows up, that's where I think it could be complicated. Although, as you mentioned, if he was not in the right state of mind and saying things that weren't true, that would be the only way you get out of it, right? Like, either he was making it up, or he was under the influence of something and wasn't recounting the exact details of what happened in that room correctly, right? I think that would be the only way to get past that.
Sure. Showing up definitely changes the legal analysis and fact pattern for his defense attorney, because initially, before you even get into the Miranda concerns and what he was properly informed of, or his mindset at that time is, was he detained? Was he just having a casual conversation? Because law enforcement tries to play that off a lot. Well, he wasn't detained. We were just having a friendly conversation with him about a murder case, right? You see that kind of exaggeration, if you will. But in this particular circumstance, the fact that he went in himself, sure, that's going to be a part of the legal analysis. But what happened when he got there? What room was he brought in? Was law enforcement, as they typically do, carrying guns? Did they place him in handcuffs? Did they give him water and other things like that to make him feel comfortable? And was he free to leave? That's really a big part of the analysis too. And if not, then that's going to be something that they're going to be looking into in great detail.
Hey, look, I always say this, but it really is our privilege to be able to present these stories to you, and we're able to do that in large part because of the support we get from our sponsors. And let me call out one that we have been partnering with for a while now, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Look, if you should find yourself in that position where you're hurt and you need legal representation, Morgan & Morgan may be who you want in your corner, because they are specialists in this area. And you know why they're so big? Because they win a lot. Verdicts and settlements in the multi-millions. And they also make the process super easy for their clients, because from starting your claim to uploading documents to signing contracts to talking to your legal team, it can all be done from your smartphone. Also, this is a firm where there's no upfront fee. You only pay them if you win. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. I want to ask you about why he would turn himself in, and I will tell you why I'm saying that, because we have a source who said that Kendall went to a lawyer's office on June 18th for a consultation. So this was after the alleged assault, before turning himself in. Do you think there was anything said during the course of that consultation, or even the idea that, if this is true, he went to a lawyer, that he maybe thought it was best for him to turn himself in as opposed to police catching him?
I don't know too many attorneys that are going to say turn yourself in. So I'm not going to say that whoever he may or may not have met with gave him that legal advice. If at any point you were in the very rare and unusual circumstance in which your client was going to turn themselves in, whether just to be booked or potentially to have a conversation or an interview with detectives, the first thing you would do is reach out to the detectives as counsel, let them know that he has confirmed as his attorney of record and that he has those type of protections, and set some parameters for your client for their protection and their safety. In addition, in the case of this high media status, I would also believe that a defense attorney who's qualified would reach out to the district attorney's office to let them know, hey, we're going to be coordinating with law enforcement to potentially have a discussion. So I'm not doubting your source that he went to a lawyer's office, but I highly doubt he followed that attorney's advice.
By the way, what is the open murder charge? Can you explain that to us? What do you need to prove it? How does that work in Las Vegas?
Yeah, so in Nevada, the way that it works is they don't have to specifically come down initially and say, hey, this is first-degree murder with malice of forethought, or this is second-degree murder, which is any other type of murder, or this is this is the felony murder rule. We also have different layers underneath that, what we call lesser included, if you will, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. So basically anything from involuntary manslaughter all the way up the gambit to first-degree murder is on the table.
And do you think they're trying to assess what exactly happened in that room? So they're not just taking his account for it, but they're also seeing what the physical evidence has to say as well?
Yeah, that's what a proper law enforcement investigation should do. I can't name the case off the top of my head, but there's a pretty famous story that's not necessarily an old wives' tale, where a gentleman would keep going into law enforcement and confessing to murders that he didn't commit. And it turned out years later, he actually did commit some offenses, and he was using that almost as a red herring. And wow, that's probably one of the main reasons why they would do such things, because the defense attorney can say, hey, disregard what my client said. He was out of his mind, or he was just making up a story, trying to get attention, whatever it may be. Look at the facts, look at the evidence, and that's going to be law enforcement's job.
I want to take a step back for something. We cover a number of different crimes here on Law&Crime and on Sidebar. Some of them are in rural communities, some of them are on the outskirts, all different across the nation. I always find it very peculiar and very unique when you see a crime committed in a big city. So we covered one recently that happened in Manhattan. I love Las Vegas. I've been to Las Vegas thousands of times. You're from Las Vegas. How often do you see something there, born and raised? How often do you see something like this happening in a major Las Vegas hotel room?
There's a lot of disturbances. I mean, if you're asking me like this specific pattern,
I can imagine stuff happens in Las Vegas hotel rooms, okay? But I'm talking about like a murder, or an alleged murder, something like that happening in a, as you mentioned, this is a hotel, there's cameras, there's surveillance, there's security. The idea of those witnesses, there's a lot of rooms. This happening, an attack like this in a Las Vegas hotel room?
It's more often than you would think. Las Vegas media out here does a great job, and as technology gets further along through the years, it's harder and harder for the casinos to hide things. But the casino industry is still the major industry in Las Vegas and essentially all of Nevada. And as we grow up as a city and we're getting closer, we're just barely above 2 million and change or so in Clark County as far as population, and the projections are closer to 3 million in the next 10, 20 years. They're getting better, but at the same time, the casinos have a vested interest to protect the sanctity of their environment. Because if you started hearing cases like this continually, tourists may not want to come because they're like, what's going on? Is it safe to go? And so safety, fun, experience is a big selling point as Vegas is a world-class destination for gaming, dining, and entertainment.
Well, let me couple that with this question. Based upon the account of Mr. Kendall, he claims that Garcia was working in the adult industry. How often do you see, and if we're taking that as true, how often do you see violence against people in that industry?
Constantly. And I see it both ways. I know of what we call them Johns, if that's, I know his name is close to that, but a John is a term basically for a gentleman or female, I guess, that is going to solicit a prostitute for sexual acts. And the female side of that, essentially, that they'll try to do a trick roll. Basically, they'll show up to a hotel room, drug them, steal their Rolex watch, demand $2,000 and say, oh, that's fine. Or excuse me, give them $2,000 and then say, no, we want more, and play those kind of games. So yes, I've represented a gambit of people that are been involved in both sides of that transaction, if you will.
By the way, he has a preliminary hearing scheduled for August 6th. The way works in other jurisdictions, I imagine it's the same way. It's where the prosecution has to present evidence to show probable cause that would be enough for to move it forward to trial, right? I mean, is that what we're expecting, some of this to be presented at that preliminary hearing?
Sure. So yeah, you said it, probable cause. It's a probable cause determination. As I explained it to clients who come in for a consultation, preliminary hearing is a low burden of proof. Slight or marginal evidence is what you need to present it. And specifically in the state of Nevada, a judge or a justice of the peace who's proceeding over the case at this stage of the proceedings cannot even judge credibility. So for an example of a case where it's just a he said, she said kind of thing, and I know that's not the case here, she's deceased, but just hypothetically in those type of situations, even if the victim was to take the stand and come off completely incredible to the judge, and your client was to take the stand and come off just absolutely perfect, the judge in the justice of the peace, at a preliminary hearing does not have the ability to rule on credibility. That is a question for the jury. And that is why so many cases get what we call bound over or pushed up into the higher district court, because they say that's a question for the jury or a question of fact. So as far as the preliminary hearing is concerned, I tell clients we call it a baby or a mini trial. They're not going to put on all their evidence. They're not going to put on all their witnesses. They just want to get in, get their slight or marginal evidence or their probable cause, and get out and get up to district court where the real fight begins.
And to be clear, based on everything I laid out, they present maybe even a fraction of this. I would imagine there's enough to hold this over for a trial. But let me ask you this. In a case like this, again, the reporting is he turns himself in. We have a preliminary hearing. Do you think we would see some movement here in the case? By that, do you mean, would you be surprised after a preliminary hearing we could see a plea or a plea offer on the table? Do we see that usually after a preliminary hearing? I'm just wondering, considering how bad this evidence is against Mr. Kendall right now.
Right. I mean, both parties, being the state and the defense, are going to need some time. So I would bet that it's not going to go forward on August 6th. I have no inside information, but just going off my 16 years of experience of doing this, a murder case, he's going to be held no bail. So it's not like he's going anywhere. And if he is even remotely in a position where he's going to take the advice of his counsel, I would suggest, hey, we don't need to rush this and go forward on August 6th. Let's collect some evidence and have a better evaluation. But to, I guess, more directly answer your question, once it gets past the preliminary hearing, yeah, that's an appropriate time to have that conversation regarding potential negotiations. I don't think it's going to come quickly unless the defendant in this case is just basically, hey, I did it. I have remorse. This is the worst decision of my life, and lays it out and instructs his attorney, just tell them I'm ready to deal. I don't want to put the family through this. Absent that, they're going to go through everything. And that's important on both sides because they have the option to go to the death penalty. I don't know if that's been decided yet or not. That's something that the state does, is they have to present a notice of intent to seek death. We still have the death penalty here in Nevada. And especially if that is on the table at any point, then you can forget about a negotiation anytime soon.
Would this be a case that would qualify for that? And how often is that imposed in Nevada?
I don't have a percentage for you. Basically, the Clark County District Attorney's Office has a committee, and they review that and make that determination of whether or not they're going to do it. Sometimes they'll do it and revoke it at a later time, as it is their choice. And basically, they got to look into the aggravating circumstances of this particular case. So, as gruesome as it sounds to us and to her family and loved ones, there may not be those aggravating circumstances in this particular case. I don't know a whole lot about the accused at this point.
Sure.
You mentioned that he has a military background. I did find some information that apparently he has a federal felony charge from West Virginia in about 2014, something involving drugs, but I don't have the exact details on that. Other than that, his criminal history seems pretty limited, but there may be more of what happened in that room that could lead to that decision.
Michael Trano, really appreciate you coming on. I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.